You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to that show about horror that everybody seems to love, even though I'm not 100%. Steven, you're still glitching on me, man. The Matrix is taking over. Steven is getting possessed by demons of the internet. This is the Horror Ramblings Podcast, guys. You know us, and it's going to be a good day. I'm excited for today. We have some guests today, and Steven, you know you're better at doing this than I am. We're just gonna, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna put it out there into the world. Steven's better at doing introductions. He's better at getting information than me. So, Steven, you do your thing, man. You're great at it.
I'm trying. At least I try anyway. So this week, like you said, we're joined by not one but two guests. That's a first for us. And one is a returning guest who the audience might remember from last season, joined me to talk about the very first three Halloween films, which I consider the John Carpenter trilogy, since those are the only ones he was technically involved in writing or something of that nature. And the other guest happens to be his wife, who, as I understand it, you dabble in podcasts. Would that be accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. Oh, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but yeah, I participate in a dabbling manner.
As involved in podcasts as I am, she listens to more podcasts than I do, which is saying something.
Well, you're too busy editing the podcast.
Right, exactly.
So please welcome Erik and Meg Slader.
That's right.
I'm very excited to have you both here because the movie we're going to talk about today, you told me, Erik, that
yes.
Meg loves this film.
Oh, yeah. He would be correct.
So that's not an understatement in the slightest. So absolutely loves it. It's
my number one of all time vampire movies.
Wow. Okay. So
see,
bold.
I called it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bram Stoker's Dracula, then Interview with the Vampire, then Lost Boys. That's my top three.
Okay.
I think those are all up there in my ranking as well. But as much as I love this movie, I knew that she had to be on the podcast because she has a real passion for it. So.
Okay. So before we jump into that, I do want to touch on just a few tiny little tidbits of news, just to kind of cover our audience. And maybe if you guys hadn't heard this stuff, maybe you know it, maybe you don't. But I did want to talk about two deaths in horror this week, which is upsetting. One was Laura Parker, who people might not remember, but speaking of vampires, she was a very prominent character in the TV show Dark Shadows, which a lot of people may not remember today other than the Johnny Depp movie made back in, late 2010s or early 2010s?
Something
I was
like that.
actually watching Dark Shadows when Netflix was the DVD, mail DVD service.
Yeah.
And I was getting the Dark Shadows. There was 2 or 3 episodes per disc, and I'd, watch them and then send it back and wait for the next disc to come in. So.
The old Netflix snail mail routine. That used to be the greatest way to do it, or at least in my opinion, but now we got streaming. But yeah, Laura Parker, she was Barnabas Collins's girlfriend on and off, or I guess she seemed like she had an unhealthy obsession with the man. If you remember, I can't remember her character name right off the top of my head, but that's what I know her best from. So she passed away this past week. And also Piper Laurie, who people would probably know best as Carrie's mom from the movie Carrie. She passed away at 91. So just wanted to kind of touch on them because they were kind of icons, or at least in my opinion, in the genre.
Absolutely.
And for anyone listening today on October 27th, if you are not listening today, you're going to be SOL, but or at least on one of the things. Dawn of the Dead is returning to theaters today. The original George Romero. So if you want to go check it out in theaters,
that's exciting.
October 27th, 45th anniversary today. So go check that out. And secondly, if you were looking forward to The Nun 2, that dropped on HBO, Max. why are we changing names with everything? It's X and Twitter, and now HBO Max and Max, and I got to change the way I say things. So Max drops today if you were looking forward to that. I have no designs in it. Anybody wanting to see The Nun 2?
I saw the first one.
Did you?
Yeah, I'm not generally big on horror sequels, like especially like
they can
horror
go
movies like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember what I'd heard about it. I feel like I heard it was. Okay.
I had heard it was.
Yeah.
I heard it was better than the first one as far as how much we get to see the nun. Other than that, it was pretty forgettable from what my understanding is. Let's be honest though, the best sequel that's going to be coming out is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. Let's just put that out there.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Because we're all looking forward to that. Anyway, let's talk Dracula, or at least more specifically Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, for a little background before we jump into what this is, I want to clarify a few things just in case anyone might be unaware. Because one thing that might be a misconception for anybody who came to this movie originally is that it was a remake of Dracula from 1931. However, one, this was not distributed by Universal, and two, they do not follow the same story beats, I guess you'd say. That would be the best way to kind of put it, because one follows more closely to the book narrative versus one that took a few more liberties, which I do kind of want to touch on a few similarities and differences that I've seen.
Oh yeah.
But essentially what Sony was concerned about, because they were the distributors, or at least one of their subsidiaries, is that obviously Universal was going to come after them because they were very litigious around this time, where if you tried to take, if anyone recalls back in the early 80s, they tried to sue Nintendo.
Yes.
I
was just thinking of that. They were so happy.
Oh, yes.
During this era. Yeah.
So same thing here. They were just like, well, what can we do? So they're not going to, even though this was a character in public domain, the
book's over 100 years old, right?
Right. So
yeah.
Oh yeah.
They had the right to do whatever they
Pushing
wanted.
150.
But they wanted to make sure that they did not step on their toes. So one, they called it Bram Stoker's Dracula. So it's not Universal's Dracula, it's Bram Stoker's. So we did it off the book, not your movie. Was kind of the main thing that they did, but then obviously they made a few changes here and there just to ensure there were no similarities that they could be like, you ripped us off, so we're coming after you. So those are some of the main details that kind of got this started. And then obviously they went a much darker, more gothy route, which
was the best choice to make.
Because this is definitely not the Universal style of horror. This is not Golden Age. This is going into more modern horror. So let's start with Meg. Just general thoughts. What is it about this movie that you love so much? Like, why is it your absolute favorite vampire movie?
Just a juxtaposition of the violence and the darkness with the romance of it. Like, it really works. It's like the obsession that he has with Mina and like that love story part that they really brought forward was, yeah.
Now, what was the very first time you saw this film?
I was probably in middle school at the time. And I didn't see it in theaters. I probably saw it on like HBO when it came out, or something like that. But yeah, from the opening scene, I was just captivated and just ready to go wherever it took me.
Right. Eric, what about you? What was your first experience with this?
I don't think I saw this one till maybe high school or college. It was right when I was like really getting into film. I know that much. Because I hadn't watched a lot of horror growing up, but this one was really interesting. At first, I was kind of thrown by it. I wasn't sure what to think about it because it was very art house, and I wasn't used to that.
In the best way.
Yeah. But what I really connected with was like the history stuff they worked in.
Yeah.
Especially with that opening, because like it's not the literal history, but there is references that if you know the background to this story, if you know the background to the character, then it makes perfect sense that they would work some of that in, the Vlad the Impaler stuff.
Yeah.
which I thought was really cool because like it's not in the book, but it is like there's context there,
right?
You know, like that makes so much more sense for the story if you know where the original inspiration for Dracula
Bram
came
Stoker based a lot of it off of the Romanian legends of Vlad the Impaler.
Exactly. So I thought it was really cool that Francis Ford Coppola decided to work that into the story and add so much more.
Yeah. Lester, what about you?
So this film was actually one of those movies that I had passed multiple times, and it wasn't because I didn't think it was going to be a good movie or anything like that. I just simply it's got a long run time. It comes in just over 2 hours, and you know I'm one of those people, I like to know a little bit about a movie before I sit and watch it if it's a longer movie. When I saw Winona Ryder. Keanu Reeves, Anthony Hopkins, and Gary Oldman, I was sold. And I actually I bought it because it was on sale at the store. Had never watched it before, and I put it in one night, and the rest is just history. To me, the thing I find most enjoyable about it, on top of everything that you guys mentioned, because I'm terrible with words, I'm sure anybody that's listened to the show knows this. Everything that you guys said were some of the reasons why I enjoyed the film, but more importantly to me, I attach myself to certain actors in films, and I really loved Gary Oldman's performance in this. I mean, he is just he's the most charming man you'll ever meet in this movie, and he's downright terrifying. And I love that switch that he's able to make in this film. To me, that was the big thing that made me hold on to this movie. And even today, I'll come back and I'll watch it. Just watching him perform makes me think of it. And I know it sounds weird. This is a really weird comparison, but when he came on to do the Harry Potter films as Sirius Black, when he first stepped out, I instantly thought of him as Dracula. Because
Gary Oldman is a national treasure. He's amazing.
And
actor.
It's just it's funny because he looks sort of similar in the Harry Potter films to how he looked in Bram Stoker's Dracula. And like that was my first thought. I was like, it'd be great if they made a little like joke about it. But even looking at the behind the scenes stuff, which I know we'll get into, but looking at the behind the scenes stuff for this film makes me appreciate it even more when I watch it, because everything from the lighting to the visual effects, all of it has a story behind it. And sometimes
you were mentioning the sound design.
The sound design is incredible.
No, you're fine. I just it's just even with the visual effects, they didn't want to do too modern of visual effects at the time. They wanted to use like 19th century effects. They wanted to sort of stay true to an older time period with the visual effects that they did with this film. And knowing that they put that extra work into it and we got the results that we got makes you appreciate it all the more. I'm a sucker for knowing that, you know, they worked really hard to do the lighting. They worked really hard to do the effects.
I loved the parts where they adjusted the frame rate so it looked like a silent movie. Oh my gosh, that was so brilliant.
Yeah.
It was brilliant on a number of levels because the book came out, I believe, in 1897. I could be off.
That sounds about
right. But it was like Victorian era.
Sure, yeah.
And I believe that's the year that the first silent films came out. The Edison movies, like The Train and stuff, and they feature them in the movie if you're looking for them. They're in that background during that one scene with all the, so I thought that was really, really cool. Coppola obviously is all about film history, and he works in things, as he's able, and this was like his opportunity to be like,
Yeah, you could tell that this movie was lovingly crafted.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to bounce around a little bit, I think.
Sorry.
No. Like I didn't really have any structure, but I had a lot of notes, and you guys were hitting all these notes, and I was like, hang on. So, so to kind of start with the effects and everything that we were just talking about. You were talking about special effects, the design, all that stuff. 3 Academy Awards won for sound effects, makeup, costumes.
Deserved every one of those.
The costuming was gorgeous.
Yeah.
The costume design. Oh.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, even his design, I mean, there's no way Universal could be like, that's ours. It was like, no, we went way over here in the opposite direction to stay as far away. But it's an iconic design.
I loved that it's like a vampire bat.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this bestial, huge looking, hairy vampire bat.
I mean, he goes through so many transformations, but they all feel right. You know, like, and I love that he starts off as like the old, like 400-year-old, you know, version of him, and then as he's like the really creepy one with the long fingernails. Like, it's iconic now.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a thing prior to this.
No.
But it makes perfect sense for the story, you know?
I mean, it was almost ridiculed a lot at the time, but again, today...
It's so over the top, I guess.
Yeah. People are just like, what is this? Because I even remember like a Saturday Night Live sketch where they did Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was Sinbad with two afro buns on his head.
You know, talking about doing the parodies of everything, one of my, and you can judge me for this one if you want, one of my favorite comedy movies of all time is Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Don't say it.
And how much that movie parodies this movie, like when you really think about it,
It does.
They could parody any other Dracula movie, but this one seems to be the one that they lean on the most when they do their parodies. So, I mean, it's so iconic.
It's iconic.
Yeah.
And that's funny, too, that this got that level of status of being iconic very much like the original Universal did, because if you take a look at the Universal monsters, when you look at basic Halloween decorations, things like that, they are the basis for the designs that you see for a Dracula type or a monster type, werewolf types. It's those designs. Yet this one has that same iconic feel to it on another level that isn't quite ever going to be, I don't think, Halloween decorations, but people know it. You see it, you know it, you're like, oh yeah, that thing.
Well, it hit on the whole goth aesthetic that was like coming into the 90s there, you know, so it...
Oh yeah, this birthed the Hot Topic generation.
Oh yeah,
Like...
the crushed velvet and the Victorian era corsets and all that stuff.
It was ahead of the times.
Sure.
Yeah, it was,
Now,
curve.
I didn't finish with the Academy Awards. It got nominated for one other. No, it's fine. It got nominated for one other, and I find it interesting because we're talking about the aesthetic of the film. It was for Best Art Direction. Lost out to another Anthony Hopkins film, Howard's End, which I don't know. I've never seen that film, so I don't know how anything to compare it to. But apparently its art direction was much, much better. So there you go. How they lost out to that is beyond me.
Yeah, I don't see how, because like it's through every frame of the movie is artistic, like from the the shadow puppet kind of thing going on, and the adjusting the frame rate to look like silent film, to the costume design, to the sets. The sets were amazing.
Oh
yeah. And while we're on this topic of things undeservedly not won, how was it that, while we're talking about him, Gary Oldman did not get nominated for this film? I feel like that's a travesty. Because I genuinely think it's because horror. There seems to be this stigma of horror films at the Academy, very much like superhero films and things like that. They're just like, well... Comedies
are always overlooked.
And to me, I don't know, I guess because I've been watching horror since I was 6 years old. This movie I'd never considered horror. Because to me, it's a Victorian love story, and it just happens to have a monster in it.
Sure.
But like, to me, the story is a love story. It's a drama. So...
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
In essence. So with Gary Oldman, at the time, now keep this in mind too, I don't know about you, but he was not really a known name at this time. Like, this would have really been... This is actually probably the one film that actually made his star brighter. Granted, he had at least 18 other films prior to this. I even think he did a little bit of television, but I'd say before this film came around, the only two movies he may have been best known for were Sid and Nancy, where he played Sid Vicious from the Sex Pistols, and Lee Harvey Oswald in JFK. Those would have been the only two that were like really, really big studio films that people may have been like, oh yeah, it's that guy. And then this movie comes along, and now it's like, oh, that guy, the guy who did the Dracula, and he's all very charismatic and charming. And then from there, we see him just do performance after performance of just some of the craziest characters.
Oh, yeah.
Some of my favorites would have been Drexel from True Romance and Stansfield from Leon the Professional. And maybe to some extent, The Fifth Element, Zorg.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Where he just takes it to that other level, but it works, you know?
A lot of his roles, when like you'll be watching the movie and not even realize that it's Gary Oldman until you're like, wait, but that's Gary Oldman. Holy crap.
We did that when we were watching Oppenheimer.
Nice.
He's in that movie. And we didn't realize it till halfway through the scene with him. And we were just flabbergasted because he like disappears into his characters.
Yeah.
It's incredible. He's a chameleon. And in this movie, he almost plays like 6 different characters, but they all are the same person, you know?
Well, and I think True Romance, like I hadn't seen
Oh,
that.
yeah,
We
that was
watched
crazy.
it,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, that's Gary Oldman. You hadn't even realized that was Gary Oldman.
Yeah, it took me a minute. He is a very different character in that
Yeah,
movie.
very different.
So he's got a lot of range is what we're saying. Like, this guy is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. The film itself, you were kind of talking about Coppola's approach to it. He actually directed the film based off of a screenplay written by James Hart, who, if you look at his filmography, this just seems so out of place, at least in my opinion. A few notable choice films that I plucked. He wrote Hook, August Rush, the second Tomb Raider film with Angelina Jolie.
Wow.
An animated movie that I don't feel like a lot of people talk about, Epic. Does that even sound familiar?
Haven't seen that one. I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. And then it makes me laugh. Muppet Treasure Island.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So a wide range, obviously adapted
All over
from
the map.
the novel. So he had good material to work with, but still, man's all over the place. He's not a genre type that has this one type, maybe for adventure type movies of a certain kind. Because I guess aesthetically, something like Hook or Treasure Island, because he also did a Treasure Island movie and then Muppet Treasure Island. So
that's interesting.
I guess he has some kind of interesting range with that style. But let's talk about Coppola for a second before we really dive into the movie itself, because I want some opinions here, okay?
Yeah.
Not knocking this man at all, okay? This may be controversial. 37 films under his belt. But how many can you name? Just going to throw that out
Besides
there.
The Godfather?
Yeah.
1 and 2? This one?
Okay. On a good day.
I'm not good at knowing directors. He's way better at knowing directors than I am.
It's a good point though. Like with Spielberg, you can like list off like 20 movies easily, right?
I just
Coppola is a little trickier.
Yeah. But people regard him as this like auteur filmmaker that has done so much. And again, I'm not knocking the movies he's done. Okay? Classics. Godfather, like you said, classic. Apocalypse Now, classic.
Oh, Apocalypse Now. There you go.
But then you start going down a list, you get to some movies like this one. I'm not knocking. It's entertaining for what it is. Peggy Sue Got Married. It's not something you'd immediately associate with him. And then, again, you go down the list more and more and more. The reason I bring this up, again, just got to say this, he's done some good movies. Great movies. But I don't know if I would consider him just like one of the greats, mainly because, and I use this as kind of a reasoning based on just facts. His company was this close to going bankrupt before this movie came out. And this movie saved it from bankruptcy.
Dang, that's crazy.
So had this movie failed, American Zoetrope would have collapsed. And again, you have to feel like this. There has to be some reasoning behind that. Why was he going bankrupt? Because his movies weren't making money. And I know it's not just his. There are others. But still, I don't feel like his pedigree is holding up like it should with certain movies behind it.
I think that maybe, and I don't know, because I don't, I'm not like a huge fan, but like it could be because it seemed like his projects are passion projects, it seems. He doesn't really care about what's mainstream and what's going to sell at the box office. He just goes for like, this is my vision, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Which is why you get like you said, movies like, like Apocalypse Now. That's kind of a controversial movie, but like it has a real solid message. This one, very art house, not for everyone, but the people that it does speak to, it really speaks to. And The Godfather, you know, that's another one that's kind of divisive. You know, like a lot of film nuts like us love that movie, but then, you know, it's not as mainstream, like that the pacing's really slow and stuff. So you have to really be into it to enjoy it.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah, and I do find that
it's just the style.
Yeah, I do find it funny now that you mentioned The Godfather that it has become divisive, because it used to be The Godfather is like one of the greatest movies ever made, no question. And a lot can be said about Citizen Kane. People have said that time and time again, but I don't agree. I feel like it is droll and boring and just it didn't do anything for me.
I have a lot of respect for that movie, but I totally understand where you're coming from, because it's of its era. You know, it's not the pacing and everything, like it's not what we're used to, but there was a lot of really cool techniques for the time that you can kind of put yourself in that.
And I'll respect it for that. But again, I can't even say that of an era works as a
it's not an excuse.
It's not an excuse for me, because I understand there are some people who can't put themselves in that mindset when a movie goes too slow. I love movies. Like, I can watch all the Universal classics. You talk about movies that have pacing. I mean, they can drag and just kind of be like, I don't know what's going on, but I can watch them. So I can't use that as it's boring, but I understand it's of that time. It doesn't matter. I can watch so many others, and they keep me intrigued the entire time. So it just... Yeah. I think my expectations were all the way, to the top, because everyone was like, this is the greatest movie ever. And then I watch it and I'm like,
is it though?
It's fine. It's fine.
I agree.
Pacing doesn't necessarily bother me. Like it bothers him a lot more.
Oh yeah, I'm so aware of it these days.
Yeah.
Like there's so many movies now could be so much shorter and so much better.
Agreed.
But what were you saying?
But yeah, like if you can get through, a lot of Kubrick movies.
Oh yeah, Kubrick's one of those.
Yeah, you're not bothered with pacing. But I think the difference is, like, in the pacing, there still has to be some sort of a hook.
Has to be substance to it.
Yeah.
You know, 2001, not for everyone, but there is something going on if you're willing to get into that, mindset and go with the journey.
It can't just be a pause. It has to be a pregnant pause. Like, it has to. Yeah.
Agreed.
It
has to earn its length.
Sure. There's a movie that I enjoy, but I know is absolutely not for everybody, because it seems like it can drag and just all the wrong ways, and it's called Silent Running. It came out in 1971, I do believe, had Bruce Dern, and it's a very environmental film. The idea is Earth has kind of gotten disheveled. You've got these astronauts trying to build these big planetariums to repopulate the planet with fresh greens and all this stuff. And Bruce Dern's character is really, really passionate about this. And then the company behind it says, no, we're going to do away with it. We're going to go a different direction, to hell with it. And we're going to shutter everything. So all the plant life, the animals, everything that you've been working on all this time, we're just going to blow it up, and you can come on home. So he just feels betrayed by this. So he's like, no, I'm gonna keep this alive. And he sabotages the ship and takes off with the planetarium. And
good for him.
It's about a 90-minute movie, but it does not really have a lot, because it's mainly him alone for most of the movie. So you can see where that might be a little slow and just
tedious, maybe.
Yeah, you're just like, all right. But I still feel like when you're watching it, if you know how to experience it, I guess, it's not...
That's the key.
Yeah, it's not a bad movie. It's not a slog, or at least not for me.
It's like half of A24's movies,
Yeah.
Some of those are really good, but you really have to be like, you have to know what you're getting into.
Exactly. So I guess let's jump into the movie. All right, so when we start the movie, we, like you mentioned, we kind of start with a history lesson with Vlad the Impaler. Sort of. It's
inspired by history, let's say.
Yeah. So you kind of have hints of things that are true, and then take some liberties to fuel the legend of Dracula, if you will.
Yeah.
And then we cut to, what was the year for this film? When did it take place?
I think it takes place, I think it's 1897.
So
I'm not
it-
100% positive. I could Google it if you
Well,
want.
I think that's accurate because that would be, like you said, around the book publishing time. So accurate.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going for.
Now, by comparison, the film adaptation they did in Universal, they actually kept it in modern day, or at least for 1931.
31?
Mm-hmm. And this is the opening scene where Jonathan Harker is going to Count Dracula to oversee his estate and all that. I did want to do a comparison because if you go back to the original Universal version, that movie starts with Renfield being the...
That's what you said.
Yeah. I think I brought that up. Yeah.
So it's almost, in a way, I won't say beat for beat, but narratively, it's essentially the same thing. Renfield goes to the town. He says, I'm heading to the castle of Dracula. And people are like,
right.
no, you can't go there. It's cursed. And he's like, phooey, I don't want to hear it. He gets there, he gets seduced, and then he becomes his slave. Unlike how it kind of gets to with Jonathan, but in essence, the same things happen, except Jonathan gets away.
And there's shadows of that in this adaptation because Renfield has already been driven insane by Dracula from his trip there, and he's already in the mental institution.
Right.
And so they like kind of hint at his, prior story, but we don't really get into it in this movie.
Yeah.
And I felt like he was a very minor character. Now, granted, I don't think he really had a whole hell of a lot to do in the Universal film outside of that opening scene. Right. But I felt like Renfield was just more of a, like they just said, here, give it to Tom Waits and there's a cameo for you. And that was it. I mean, he didn't really do much in service to the story outside of giving you a little context to why Jonathan is now doing what he's doing.
Yeah, he is, Renfield is to Jonathan Harker what Smeagol is to Frodo.
Ah, that makes sense, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That would...
Yeah, he's gone down that path. He's, well-worn and insane, and if Jonathan Harker continues, that's where he'll end up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, Keanu Reeves...
Oh,
he's
God.
the weak point of this movie.
Yeah.
He's like, I love me some Keanu, but
Same.
like his performance in this was so like milquetoast.
Milquetoast.
He was very miscast. I would
agree.
100% agree with that. Now, at the time, I don't think when I very first saw it, at the time, he was best known to me as Ted from Bill and Ted.
Yes.
So when you come into this and he's trying to do something different, but he's also kind of
his accent,
tedding it up.
Yeah.
You're just like, I don't know if I like this, but you kind of go with it. Now it's really hard to listen to.
Yeah, he needed to have a lot more, charisma, because when Mina is torn between her fiance and Prince Dracula, in this movie, you're like, why the fuck are you torn? Like, just go with Dracula. Why is that even a choice?
Yeah.
Agreed. Les, did you have something to say?
I'm just going to say, for the record, Keanu even knows his performance was bad in this. He's done a few interviews where he's actually said that this is one of his big regrets, that he wasn't in a better place as an actor when he did this movie. So it's nice to see him kind of own up to the fact that he knows his performance wasn't as good as it could have been in this one. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, like I said, I love Keanu.
Yeah.
I
Same.
love he's
he's
a great
phenomenal.
actor, but this was just
This is easily his worst role. One of the best movies he's been in, but unfortunately not his best acting performance.
Well, that's why I say I feel like he was just miscast. I don't really like even.
I don't blame him.
Even because, like Lester had mentioned, he said that he wasn't in a good headspace. He mentioned that he had just been working on other films. He was really exhausted, and then he had to come and do this. I don't even know.
That's why his hair turned white.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm not even sure that if he was in a better space, if he would still be, because the accent, I mean, that's you're placing this entire film in London, or at least a good portion of it, or at least in Europe, and yet you don't have you have one actor who's actually from London in the entire cast. And it's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of insane. Yeah.
It's like, why are you not hiring some other people who are within that area to play these type of characters? Because there are so many British actors that I could probably name off the top of my head that would have been perfect. Even the other opposite choice who almost got the role before him, Johnny Depp, would have probably been a better choice.
Wow. That'd be a
Yeah.
different movie at that point.
Agreed.
I mean, a better movie, honestly.
I think he would
Yeah,
have.
if it was Johnny Depp versus Gary Oldman, yeah, that's a tough choice.
Yeah,
That's-
then there's,
I
like,
can-
some actual
I can
drama.
see some like, ooh,
Yeah.
impossible choice. But
Yeah.
And
That's
yeah,
great.
Gary Oldman and this Keanu Reeves, it's like
Poor
yeah,
little
that's-
fella.
yeah.
it's like you're trying. It's fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
An attempt was made.
Yes.
but again, I try to give him credit. Like we said, we love him to death, but he is not good in this film.
I'm glad he got another chance too. He got The Matrix is after this, right? So
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
a little bit, but not too far after. But yeah, he got his redemption, and obviously John Wick is just catapulted him. I guess Speed would have actually been right after this to really kind of give him on that action beat. So we kind of see Jonathan go through his torture in Dracula's castle. So many iconic moments within that scene or that whole section of the film. The blood licking off of the knife is probably one of the more iconic scenes that everybody always remembers. And Gary Oldman was very, very drunk that night, as I understand it.
Was he?
Yes. 'Cause
Wow.
they
that's
were
amazing.
apparently doing this late at night, and he just got hammered, and he's like, to do this, I'm going to have to be in a headspace. And granted, I know he's not licking actual blood, but
Right.
the act of what you're doing and kind of being in that headspace, I can kind of see that.
Well, I wanted to mention I loved all the scenes in that castle, how they made his shadow do different things from what he was doing. It was so clever.
Yeah, the practical effects, again, I know we keep mentioning it, but they're so good in this. I'm so glad this was like before CG kind of took over.
Sure, yeah.
Because like it's timeless because of it, you know? Not that the effects look real, they didn't have to, but there's a certain dreamlike quality throughout this movie that sells it.
Yeah, it's
Right.
surreality.
Yeah, and
It's like surreal.
they lean into it, and I love that about it. I really want to point out the set design of Dracula's castle is like next level. There's something about the world building here where like every time I watch this movie, I get something different out of it. And a lot of that's the set design. I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that before. That's a really interesting detail they put in there. It's like on screen for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You know, but the costuming and all that. Oh man.
Well, and that leather, I made in my notes, I put that leather armor was a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it was like nothing
bold.
I'd ever
Yeah.
seen before, you know?
Yeah.
So interesting. It almost looked like
Well-
when you look at like a text on anatomy, how it's
Yeah.
like the muscles,
Yeah,
you know, it
that's a
like
good point.
evokes the musculature of the human.
Agreed.
It was so cool.
and I feel like it's all the way it was shot, because it's like Tim Burton's Batman. The bat suit looks horrible in the wrong lighting, but
Right.
it looks great on screen because of the way they shot it. And I feel like it's kind of a similar thing here with stuff like that.
I could agree. And that would have been around the same time that whole technique effects, trying to come up with these new designs of how you create this body armor, if you will.
Yeah.
Oh, I did also want to mention the movie's focus on telling the narrative through snippets of letters and diaries. Like, there's a lot of scenes that start out where it's like the character narrating, you know, what they're putting in their diary or
Right.
the letter. And that's, you know, was a great homage to the book because the book
Direct
is
callback.
told throughout letters and diary entries.
Right. And it's a very smart choice also to kind of keep it separated from the other narratives that we've kind of seen, because I don't think anyone had really done that with Dracula adaptations, because I know we keep referencing back to Universals, but there were so many others that had happened.
Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's the perfect way to include exposition.
Sure,
You know,
absolutely.
Because, you know, you're reading this letter that's being sent and it's telling you the things that are about to happen or have just happened.
Right.
You know, it fits. It's not boring. You don't get like a dump of information that doesn't fit.
Well, So y'all were talking about practical effects and things like that. I did want to mention one that I always found to be kind of fascinating, and that was the blue flame that we see on the way to the castle.
Yeah.
This was an optical effect, and the only one used in the entire movie. And kind of referencing what you said about the book, this was a direct callback to something in the book that they don't really explain in the film. It's just kind of an odd little reference to be like,
just there.
Yeah, what is this? And so to anyone who might not know, apparently, according to the novel, these blue flames would appear every so often and apparently mark, this sounds very video game-ish.
Yes.
Marking.
It looks like it too.
Yeah, but it's like a mark for a hidden treasure or something of that nature. So
it's like a side quest.
Right. It's like, well, I got to remember that. And then the coach driver, I think in the novel, places some rocks or something near it, so it's like marked, so he knows to come back during the day, and he can find his treasure. So I just thought that was an interesting little. It's such an oddball scene when you see it, but again, it's a nice little callback to the novel.
Absolutely, and yeah, it's really interesting that they put that in there because there's no point in putting it in there, but it is in the book, so it's like, hey, we're gonna just
I love
throw
that they
this in.
don't explain it.
Yeah, it's left
like,
unexplained, which kind of makes you like feel like a little like put off, like you're like, that was weird. What's going on here?
I think it plays into the dreamlike element of the setting because it's these weird like mummified animals on the crossroad signs, and then you have this coach driver whose arm like preternaturally extends and lifts Jonathan Harker up and like floats him into the carriage, and it's just like
this is just happening.
Okay, this is happening, we're just gonna go with it, like nothing to see here, this is just how physics works in the Transylvania mountains.
Exactly.
Like, all right.
I do want to mention though, since you mentioned the blue glowing waypoint in this, there's a moment where Jonathan's exploring the castle and he finds like a box and there's like this liquid that starts dripping upwards. Like all of that felt very video gamey, like the kind of thing where you're like exploring a castle and you're finding all these weird things. It was like something from Dark Souls. It's like all this lore that's like left to be discovered.
If you notice, like the treasure chest that he opens to find that bottle, like it was lit from within. Like, you could see it. It made it look like the treasure itself was glowing.
Which is so weird because this is prior to video games. Like, before that was a trope in video games. This is before 3D gaming. So it was really kind of surreal that was like almost like, I don't know. That was a weird little detail.
I guess there were a lot of fans of this film that were just like, you know what? This would be awesome in a video game. Let's just use that.
That's probably what it is. Yeah.
So I'm trying to keep the details because they kind of do a little bouncing back and forth. But after Jonathan kind of gets taken by Dracula, so to speak, to be fed upon by his brides, who they never really expound upon them very much in the film either. And actually one of them went on to be a very well-known actress. I don't know if any of you recognize her, Monica Bellucci.
Oh, was that her?
Yeah, one of them was.
Okay, yeah.
But the other two I'm not really too familiar with. I think they were just lesser actresses and other things. I don't know. But yeah.
They did a good job in this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, they're very, very sinister, seductive, and vicious all at the same time. It's a nice blend.
That scene with Dracula giving them the baby.
Oh, yeah.
Nightmare fuel right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Hell, even not to bounce too far ahead, but I wanted to talk about the scene with Lucy and the child that she was taking.
Yeah.
That child was apparently very, very terrified for good reason.
Yeah.
And you can kind of sense that as you're watching that scene. Like
childhood trauma unlocked.
Yeah, like you feel that tension because you're also...
It gets under my skin every time.
I know that the baby scene is terrible, but you don't see it, kind of...
It's implied.
Right. Whereas she's practically holding this child hostage. You see that child, crying, terror in its eyes, and you're like, is she going to kill this child? And you're just waiting for it. So you're with the child going, oh my God, is she gonna, I don't know. Yeah. We just saw a baby die, or at least we know it did.
Right. It's on the table.
So we kind of go back, or let's go back in the film a little bit, where Dracula goes and seduces Lucy. Now, granted, he had seen Mina's picture, obviously very reminiscent of his old love, and so now he wants to kind of get to her. The whole Lucy thing, there, I don't know how all of you felt about this, but the very first time I kind of saw their consummation, if you will, I don't know how I felt about it. I was like, what is going on here? There's a werewolf and he's doing some things.
It's pretty graphic and it is weird.
Yeah, because it's almost bestiality in some form, in some ways. You know, I know he's a man, but he's also in wolf form. Why?
That's where furries started.
Oh no!
Oh God!
Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know how to comment on that scene, honestly. Prior to that, like the lead up to it is great. The visuals
Her
with
going through the
wind.
labyrinth.
Yeah. Like the way it's
her-
shot,
Her
the gown,
train and stuff.
Yeah.
On the statues,
With the statue, like
yeah.
the visuals there are some of the best visuals in the movie, I think. But then that one scene where I just don't know what to think of that.
Yeah,
that's a choice. That is
an absolute
no build up
choice.
to that.
It's tribute to Beauty and the Beast. That's all.
Sure.
I guess so. Yeah. It's
Well, it's I jotted down in my notes here that this movie all throughout it's pointing out the juxtaposition between deep heartfelt love and animalistic passion and desire. Like it plays with the tension between those two. You know, so you have loves and making love, but it's the carnality,
that makes sense. I mean, in all
thematically, I guess,
yeah, like you said, it's a choice to do it that way. So, in essence, this isn't passion for him; it's just animal lust. So, being in kind of half animal form.
Well, and in that scene, when he sees Mina seeing him, he says, "Do not see me.
Yeah.
Do not see me now," and he flees. And then in the scene after that, when he's the prince, he she's across the street and he says, see me now. So like he doesn't want her to see that more
the dark
base,
side of him,
brutal side of him.
Yeah, just like an extreme way of doing that. But
Yeah.
The werewolf thing is interesting because I don't know, there might be some sort of connection there with like the old vampire mythologies. Maybe they used to be one and the same and then they kind of became two separate things over the years in pop culture.
Well,
but
historically vampires have been said to have control over wolves.
Oh yeah. Okay.
True.
Yeah.
Lucy's suitors. I want to talk about them for a second because this was an interesting little group here, and
Poor little fellas.
I honestly feel like they kind of lighten the mood a little bit with the film. So I wouldn't say they're like comic relief. I feel like it would be a step too far, but their camaraderie, their where they kind of vie for her affection, and of course she's just taunting each one of them.
Well, and they're all three caricatures of the different forms of masculinity accepted at the time of the Victorian era. Because you have your, the Texan with the big knife. You have, the rugged frontiersman, all strength and no brains. And then you have the doctor, who, in Victorian times, doctors were very well esteemed, because he's the learned man, the man of science.
That's right.
And then you have, the
That's
aristocrat, like the nobility.
Yeah.
So it's like the three different ways that were acceptable to be a man in Victorian times.
Nice. Yeah, that is, yeah. Wow, she's like...
That's
pulling
brilliant.
out
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Like, I'm going to have new
That's really
perspective on all this movie when I watch it again.
Did you notice the casting?
Yes, so I did want to talk about the casting of each one of them because the lesser known out of the three, I would say, is Billy Campbell, who plays Quincy. And the only thing I know him from was The Rocketeer. Now, granted, I know he's probably been in other things, but I couldn't tell you who he is. Like, look at him and be like, oh, that's that guy. But then the Doctor, Richard E. Grant, I think a lot of people have gotten to know him over time.
Oh yeah,
where he's become more and more popular, and of course, Lord Arthur is Carrie Elways, who everybody knows. That's everybody's Robin Hood, or
Wesley.
Yeah, or Wesley,
Princess Bride, yeah,
or what's the character's guy for our audience? The guy from Saw, whose name I can't
that's right,
remember.
he's in that too.
Yes.
Who I have to bring this up too because it's an observation I've noticed. He cannot say the word bastard for some reason. This is a fact. Go watch Saw, listen to how he says it, and just come back to me on that because I can't make heads or tails out of it.
Like you with Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, I can't say Pierce Brosnan.
See, you
There
said
we
it.
go. I said it. Yeah.
Yay! You just had to be coaxed into it. I just don't think
right.
he can say it. I don't know. He says bastard. That's how it comes out. And then, of course, Lucy, we haven't even touched on her. Sadie Frost, another actress I don't know from anything else. Like, this is the only thing I know her from. I may have seen her in other stuff, but this is all I got. But she was pretty much there. She was actually up for Mina, as I understand it. And I think the only reason, what's her name?
Ryder?
There you go. Thank you. Winona Ryder got the role. And I don't know if any of you guys know this or not, but she was actually supposed to be in Godfather 3. And she was going to be Michael's daughter. But
That makes sense.
something happened. I can't remember 100% where she had to drop out. So this was almost kind of like a, well, since you didn't get to do that, here's this. And now you can be in this role. And
I thought she was great for this role.
she did really good. I don't think she phoned it in like Keanu did. But I also feel like this was a passion project for her in some ways as well, because as my understanding, she found out that this movie was going to be made as a TV movie. And she went and kind of snatched up the rights to it and took it to Coppola and be like, hey, would you maybe want to look at doing this? And he was like, oh, yeah, sure. And then everything just kind of worked out.
I actually, I've been looking at some trivia for the film while we've been recording today, because I like to just look at extra things in case I miss something. Here's an interesting little tidbit I'm just going to read real quick. It says, Francis Ford Coppola, I probably said that completely wrong, got involved because Winona Ryder was worried he hated her. It says, with Winona Ryder's star power now backing Dracula, the production began its search for a director. In 1991, they found Coppola. Now through the direct offer, not through a direct offer, but through a case of mending fences. The filmmaker had originally cast Ryder to play Mary Corleone, daughter of Michael Corleone, in the epic The Godfather Part 3, but Ryder's health forced her to back out last minute. Coppola infamously replaced Ryder with his own daughter, and Ryder's 11th hour departure led her to worry that the legendary filmmaker didn't like her. According to Entertainment Weekly, Ryder's concern over this impression she'd made with him was so prevalent around Hollywood that the director finally agreed to meet with her just to reassure her that he didn't hold any grudge over the Godfather departure. By the end of that meeting, he had the Dracula script in hand, and as a fan of the book from childhood, he was hooked.
Interesting. Okay.
Just a little tidbit.
So health concerns, yeah.
Has any of you read the book?
It's been a long time, and it was like probably 20 years ago.
Yeah, same for me too. Probably.
Yeah.
Well, I've read it a few times, but I think the last time I read it was probably about 15 years ago
Now-
or so.
I do highly recommend the audiobook, by the way.
Now, from my understanding,
to do it.
before they even started filming this movie, I believe they all actually sat down and read the book aloud so that they could get a feel for what they were
Nice.
doing. I'd read that somewhere,
That's-
which I could see that, and I think that's, you should definitely look into your source material when you're making a film, because let's be honest, there are plenty of films out there that do not do that, and it causes
Absolutely.
issues. So
And I think, even though they made a lot of changes to what was in the source material, they captured the feel of the
Yeah.
story.
The essence, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, the spirit's there. In fact, I would go as far to say that this might be one of the better book adaptations out there. Even though it doesn't follow the book exactly, it has a lot of the same themes and stuff. And the only thing they really added to it, actually improved it, I think, was the love story angle, because that's not in the original piece so much. But I think that adds this really interesting through line that works so well for the movie version. But yeah, it's a great adaptation because it's not just an adaptation of the book, but it's adaptation of like the kind of just the overall story. Like it does take elements from the older movies and kind of works them in. I think there's even certain lines that aren't from the books, but are from, I want to say the Universal version from the 30s.
Yeah.
Like the, I don't drink wine,
Yeah.
you know, I believe that's from the original, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of one of those things that you have, there's certain lines like that you have to hit every time you do a Dracula, you know, remake. You know, there's certain lines you got to kind of work in there. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting that they adapted the book so well, but they still brought in a lot of the things we associate with the character.
And it's funny too that when we talk about book adaptations, how some can do it so right and some do it so wrong, it really makes you wonder why the ones that go wrong, why do they go wrong? Is it that they're trying to do something so outside the narrative to try to make it their own, which I can respect.
Sure.
But
it works in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. But what is it that you don't like about the source material that you're trying to change it so much that you deviate and it changes the narrative entirely?
Yeah, at that point, just do something original, right?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
Inspired by this thing, but it, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, even like you said, adding in the romantic aspect, the love story, I do believe that is the biggest strength of this film, is when it comes to that.
Absolutely.
Because when you go back to the original, using the Universal as your basis, even I would even say to some degree the horror of Dracula from Hammer, they don't do that love story. It's he's a vampire, he's got his brides or his minions, if you will, and then he terrorizes a town, and that's pretty much what it boils down to. There's nothing more beyond that.
Yeah, this was the movie that made vampires sexy.
Yeah.
Which it's interesting
And
because
now, how many vampire adaptations do we have where the vampires are? It's like
True Blood.
just known that vampires are sexy. That's a known fact. That was not
thing.
known before this movie.
Agree?
That said, though, I feel like there was always the metaphor there. There was definitely a metaphor that goes way back, and you could see this in the early films, but it was more reserved, you know, as far as like, you know, sexuality and all that.
Yeah, it was more innuendo.
Yeah. This one kind of made that blatant. It kind of put that front and center, like this is what the movie's about. We're gonna hit you over the head with it, you know.
So would we say that this is probably at the time when this came out, because I know that the gore factor of this film really turned some people off. Not me.
It was amazing.
But
it's nothing compared to what we get now.
Right.
Like, it actually feels really reserved now.
Exactly.
Like that scene where they have the blood
Less is more.
Like coming in from both
That
sides
was
of the
over
room,
the
over
top.
bed.
That was
I
like The Shining.
That
like
is so beautiful.
That was kind of gross. For whatever reason, blood, like realistic looking blood in movies, does kind of get to me sometimes. But yeah, it was well done.
I find it funny that this was probably had to have been one of the goriest Dracula films made at the time. And I'm sure if we were to, like, I have yet to see Last Voyage of the Demeter, but I'm sure that one goes way beyond this. So,
probably.
Where are we at in the story? Anywhere. So yeah, Lucy is now turning. She's been seduced by horny Dracula, and her suitors are all trying to figure her out. So they go and touch on or seek out the help of one Abraham Van Helsing. Now,
oh my God, Anthony Hopkins is terrific in this role.
He's good in everything. Doesn't matter how shitty the movie is. Like, he's good in everything.
That's what I wanted to talk about. So we haven't even talked about or touched on Anthony Hopkins at this point. So he's probably still on fire at this point from Hannibal, from Silence of the Lambs. And so his energy, he's also, I would say, if there was comic relief, he would be it. If you were to point,
he plays the perfect crackpot.
Yeah, just somebody.
He's like in Glee, like, oh, she's going to be the bitch of the devil. Like,
he's a mad scientist, but he's totally right. Like he knows what he's talking about, but he's a little kooky because is into all that occult stuff, but like he knows his shit, you know.
Zero social graces,
right?
At
Which
all.
I think
just
is
totally where Mina asks him at dinner, like if Lucy suffered, and he's like, yeah, of course she suffered. She was in very excruciating pain, and then we stabbed her in the heart and cut off her head, and like, just
and everybody's like, what?
At dinner.
Yeah, that was great. He's awesome.
Yeah, he definitely brought a very interesting take to the character because, like you said, the kookiness of the character is not something I would have necessarily associated with the character of Van Helsing.
Yeah.
But him doing it within the context of this film, it just works. I don't really know how to explain it. And I've heard people complain that there's an odd comparison to his Van Helsing versus Holman's Dracula, but I feel like they work. And they don't really interact that often to kind of clash, so I don't really see what the problem is.
I was going to just say that the thing that I appreciate about Anthony Hopkins is Van Helsing. They did have Van Helsing written a specific way. A lot of his behavior is actually completely improvised by Anthony Hopkins.
Wow.
So, that is in one of the behind the scenes. I think there's... it might have been a documentary about the film, like a small documentary, but that sounds like an Anthony Hopkins thing to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a genius at line delivery.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorites is from, what was it, Thor Ragnarok? When he shows back up. Oh, shit.
As Loki?
Yeah. I don't know why. It's just how he says it.
Loki as Odin?
Yeah.
There's layers there.
Yeah. It's just so perfect.
Yeah.
While we were talking about him, and I had something I wanted to bring up. Oh, yes. So we love Anthony Hopkins for sure. But little fun fact, he actually took this role away from a very well-loved actor that we all know and love today, and that is Liam Neeson.
Whoa.
He was so close to being Van Helsing, and then Anthony Hopkins was like, I'm interested. And they're like, nope, sorry. And they shut the door on Neeson to get Anthony Hopkins. So
I think that was the better choice.
You think
actually.
so?
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Well,
I could see Liam Neeson like really killing at this role.
I mean, he
more
could,
serious version probably.
But I mean, I just love Anthony Hopkins.
I do
Van
too.
Helsing.
Yeah, I do.
He's like your nutty, great uncle that like.
Yeah, I will say though, the first time I saw it, I didn't love him in this movie. I love him as an actor, but I thought he felt kind of out of place. But now it just works, and maybe that's because I've seen it like 12 times.
Well, you have like the movie is kind of you have to have a touch of madness to be able to get in the right frame of mind to hunt these creatures.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
And I think his age also kind of works to his advantage because he seems like a more seasoned professor versus
he does seem like he knows what he's talking about.
Right. And
I loved the scene where they they say that they're going to call for him and they introduce him getting the telegraph and the fact that it was historically accurate, the theater, the teaching theater that they had, like that was actually what teaching theaters looked like in Victorian England, where it had like the professor in the center and then your tiers of students and even the knocking that they did at the end when the professor left, like
that's a thing.
Medical students would do that, like,
that's really
instead
cool.
of clapping, they would knock on the tables.
That's interesting.
Right. So what about this one little detail that they kind of changed, or at least I guess within the lore of Dracula out in the daytime? Did that bother anybody?
No, he's the king of vampires.
Yeah.
He can turn into mist. He can turn into bats. He's super powerful.
That's kind of where I come at it from. Like, they do say, like, it weakens him, but it's like a weakness, but it doesn't kill him.
Right.
I thought it worked.
Yeah, I don't...
Well, and plus, at that point, he'd already been feeding off of Lucy. And
that's
so
the thing. He was at his full strength,
some of his
basically.
Strength. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I didn't feel like it... And like you said, they kind of touched on... I think it was Van Helsing actually kind of brought it up, where he was just like, it's whatever you know about the legends are not true, or they're misinformed, or something of that nature, to kind of toe that line around it.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
I was just going to say, I think it contributes a lot to the story in the aspect of, when I think of man against monster, I don't see the sun as the thing that can take the monster out. Like, it has to be the man against the monster. The monster has to be slayed by the hero of the story. I don't want the sun to take out my big bad guy. So
I think the sun weakness is an interesting trope, and when it's used correctly, I feel like it works. Where it's
no sparkling in the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
does
their
not
mistake.
work.
Yeah. Like, that's when you know you did it wrong.
Yeah, that's when vampires got ultra sexy, or at least tried to be sexier, and it was just
Tried
like
to.
you went too far in the wrong direction. It's like,
Yeah, there's a spectrum here, and you
Vampires
guys
do
are
not
off of it.
fucking sparkle.
speaking of the sun thing, just real quick, sorry to interrupt you, Stephen, and your thought
No,
real quick.
you're-
but
No,
just
continue.
have any of you ever seen the show The Strain? Does that ring a bell to anybody?
So
I know I've
I know
heard
of it, but I've never
the
seen
Strain
it.
is about vampires. If you get the chance to check it out, it's based off of some books. It's a really good series. They are not sexy vampires, I will tell you that now. But one thing that I actually thought was really interesting about that show, the whole sunlight trope, is these people were cornered by the vampires as they were coming in, and they had they were growing pot in their basement. So they had the sun lamps, you know. And when the vampires
Nice.
got close, the lamps kind of moved, and the artificial sunlight actually burned them as well. So they were able to
The UV light.
So the UV rays were able to actually harm them, and they looked at it from a scientific spectrum, and they were like, UV rays can kill certain viruses, and they followed it like it was a parasitic thing. So I think a
cool.
concept like that's kind of interesting, and then obviously, in like Blade and things like that, they have the grenades that have the light and everything.
Well, and you have the roots of that
Exactly.
virus thing in this movie as well, because Van Helsing is saying it's a disease
Yeah.
of the blood. He's giving a lecture on diseases of the blood when he's first introduced.
That's true. So did you guys know that Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder, I don't know why her name is slipping my mind. Like, I can see her face clear as day, but I keep wanting to say
Right.
another name. Did you know that they kind of sort of technically got married under the eyes of God in this film?
Yeah.
Sorry, Keanu and
Winona Ryder?
Winona? I didn't know they were. Are they together still?
No. What?
I don't keep up with celebrity gossip.
So here's how it kind of goes down. So if I just said it to you like that, you were like, oh shit, they're married?
yeah.
So they apparently had to do a reshoot in the film during the scene where she goes to, after she had been meeting with Dracula and he's been seducing her, and then she gets word that Jonathan is alive, and she goes to Romania to marry him. And apparently they needed to do a reshoot, and they did it in a Greek Orthodox church out in Los Angeles. Oh. And it was done in a very genuine ceremony with a genuine priest
Wow.
who technically married them, not legally, but
Sure.
through the eyes of God, as they
The actual
say.
ceremony. Yeah.
Right.
That's fascinating.
So apparently to this day, they text each other, hello husband, hello wife.
That's so clever.
So-
Oh man, that's funny.
I thought it was a very interesting little tidbit. Maybe some people might
And
not
I
know.
loved that the Greek Orthodox, seeing, the wedding, that was super cool.
Definitely.
And I want to touch on this too. And I know this is a little off, but it made me remember something that they kind of touched on in another thing. Have you guys been watching Chucky?
No, not yet. We saw the remake with what's her face? April Ludgate.
Oh,
I can't remember her name at the moment. Aubrey Plaza.
yeah.
We saw that one. Yeah.
Well, I
haven't
want
seen the show
to
yet.
just briefly kind of touch on this because I found this to be very funny, and I don't want to spoil anything big, but something had happened in this last episode that I watched where his voodoo-ism, I guess if you consider how he bounces from doll to doll, has been tainted by Catholicism.
Oh wow.
And now it's like the voodoo god Damballa is abandoning him because he took part in an exorcism. And
that's interesting.
I found the way they kind of played it all out, I just found it to be hilarious because I was like, okay, so being part of Catholicism, the voodoo's like, no, I'm out. Fuck you. You've just, sacrilege.
Wow.
Which is kind of weird because Catholic saints are part of actual voodoo rituals. So
That's the thing. Yeah.
I don't know. It cracked me up the way they were doing that. So where are we? She got married. They got married, and he comes back with her. I know he spots Dracula. This is one of his worst line readings, by the way,
It
in the
really
entire
is.
movie. I can't even remember what he said, but it was something along the lines
He's
of
the man.
he looks so young, but he says it in that Ted-esque
It
voice.
reminded me. It's one of the only parts of the movie that really kind of brought me out of it, and I did laugh out loud. I think this last time when he said it, because it felt like a high school play where he's just like reading the line from the book or whatever.
Yeah.
And it would have been it should be a really powerful moment where he's like, this is the guy that tormented me, you know?
Yeah.
Instead, it's kind of laughable, unfortunately.
The scene where Mina and Dracula are kind of, I guess you'd say, consummating their relationship. The passion, the sexual tension in that room. I heard the two of them didn't get along for a while. And
Whoa.
I've heard there are multiple reasons. One I heard recently was that maybe possibly, they might have been a thing. And it just fell apart, and then it was like, I don't want to be around you anymore. But I mean, you feel that energy in that scene. I could
Lots of
believe that.
chemistry.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, it is like, it's funny because it's not a sex scene, but it feels like it. Like it's filmed like it, and yeah.
might as well be.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's the kind of thing I wouldn't feel comfortable watching with the kids in the room, you know? We saw this in theaters. They re-released it last year, right around the same time, this time of year, I think.
Yeah.
It was for one of the anniversaries, 20th, 30th? Are we that old?
It'd been
Jesus.
20th at least, or no shit, it might have been.
I think it was the 30th, maybe. But anyways, we saw it in...
like, what?
92, 93?
92? Okay.
Yeah.
I do remember, though, because we saw it in theaters, and there was someone that brought their kids, and I think they got up and walked out during this scene to go get popcorn or something.
They didn't go out before?
I felt kind of bad because it was kind of awkward.
Jesus Christ. What movie did they think they were coming to see?
I mean, I can't say much because, like I said, I watched this movie when I was in middle school.
Right.
Like,
I mean,
Fair.
It is what it is.
Fair.
But yeah.
I feel like taking your child to a film in a theater is different from home viewing. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, you can't fast forward, you can't mute it, like it's just there.
You paid for this, you're there. So
and plus I was a half feral child. Like I would just do stuff on my own without adult supervision.
Yeah.
So,
Understandable.
During that scene, or at least I guess as the scene kind of progresses, once Van Helsing and the trio of they need a name. I don't really know what we'd call it. Yeah, that works.
Three suitors.
The three suitors. There we go. So as they show up, we actually get probably some of the more interesting aspects of this film, at least as far as Dracula. I feel like the bat, I know we kind of talked about it before, but the bat look is so amazing. No one talks about it anymore. Or at least I don't hear people talk about it or discuss.
Can you imagine how long he had to be in makeup to get those prosthetics put on? Like, it's a full body, like, practical effects. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, like, the kind of slimy, wet look that they
very
achieved
disturbing.
with it. Yeah.
But I love how he's, like, hanging upside down in that church.
Yeah.
That abandoned church.
Yeah, when they're destroying the boxes of earth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really wish, and I know it probably wouldn't have been practical, or at least with the practical effects, to actually see him fly as the bat creature, because you can kind of see where his arms are kind of tucked back like bat wings would be, but we don't actually get to see like a full flying. And I know it's probably not feasible, but
they probably tried and they were like, this looks terrible.
Yeah.
Well, and just the way Gary Oldman, like his posture when he's in that costume, he looked like a bat. Like he kind of had his shoulders forward and his neck crunched down, and his wings / arms were like kind of pushed back like a bat holds its wings. Oh, it was so cool.
Totally.
And then we also have the scene where he just dissolves into a shit ton of rats. Which no thank you, I'm good with that.
Oh, I did want to mention like a little bit before the scene where they have Jonathan and Mina getting married. they cut that with the scene of Dracula, killing Lucy.
Yeah.
I forgot about
those two scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And, you kind of see on Mina's face at one point where, like, her glance goes sideways right after a scene from Lucy and Dracula. And it's brilliant, the tension between those two.
And that is a thing that Coppola does really well in the movies of his that I've seen. Because like in the first Godfather, that ending with the church, the baptism scene, and then you got all the murders going on at the same time, that montage.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. One of the greatest sequences in cinema, I would 100% say.
Absolutely.
So I did want to talk about one other aspect of this film, which I feel like is probably one of its strongest aspects, and how it didn't win a fucking Oscar for this is beyond me. And that is the music.
Oh, yes.
Okay? Absolutely probably one of the best scores. This was probably the very first film score I actually owned. Like old cassette tape. I'd never had one. You have your albums and everything, but this was the very first film score I said, I want this.
It's immersive.
Yes.
It's like just brings the emotions of the scene to life. It's great.
Oh yeah, a good soundtrack goes a long way, and this is a good one.
Yeah, the composer, whose name I'm going to try not to botch because he's Polish, Wojciech Kilar, I think is his name. He had never done an English language feature film before this film. He'd been working doing Polish films since 1958, and then after this he did 3 Roman Polanski films, and then I think one from Jane Campion, if I'm not mistaken. But absolutely.
Knocked it out of the park.
Do what?
He knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, like, I can't think of another score of his, even looking at the other English language versions that he did, none of them stood out. But this one, absolutely one of my all-time favorite film scores ever. And it just brings this energy, the viciousness, the goth aspect of it. It just, I don't know. It's like chef's kiss to the entire film. 100%.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, any other aspects come to mind before we move along?
I will say that the love scene after Dracula, materializes from the green fog into Mina's, safe house in the insane asylum, which again is like so ridiculous.
Yeah.
The doctor's like, "Oh, you'll be safe here in the insane asylum." Like, yeah. But that love scene is like one of the most romantic scenes in any movie. Like, it's just beautiful, so emotional how he's like, he wants to be with her, he's loved her forever, and she loves him. And then as he's offering her his blood, he's like, yes, I've wanted this for centuries. And then there's the moment where he's like, no, I cannot do this to you. I love you too much to condemn you to that. And just, that was so good.
Great dialogue, amazing delivery. Totally agree. Yeah, it is interesting that the reincarnation thing that they put in there.
Yeah,
that was an interesting angle.
Which is
they kind of sold it.
Yeah, and I feel like that was I don't really say it was a trope per se, but I feel like it's become more of one. But we had seen that like prior to this. I would say Fright Night used that same kind of idea of a girl the vampire remembered from way back when. It was like, holy shit, that's just like her.
Yeah, that line, "I have crossed oceans of time to find you."
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know why that's so...
It's great.
It's a great line, but every time I hear it now, Jim Carrey ruined that line for me.
Oh.
Because there was an interview on, what was it? The Tonight Show, I think it was. He was making a joke, as he does at the time. And of course, this is when he was like hot, like just on fire hot. And he said he was auditioning for the role in Count Chocula, the movie. And then he did that line reading saying, "I have crossed oceans of milk to be with you." And that's all I can hear anymore every time I think of that line. So thanks, Jim.
Yeah, this movie's got a lot of great lines, real memorable lines, like the one where Dracula says, the listen to them, the children of the night, what sweet music they make.
Yes.
Like, oh, so good.
Iconic.
And I feel like I've heard that one reused in other films.
I was going to say...
But I can't remember which ones they are.
It's been used in a lot of films, but this is the film that I remember it from the most. I think, and it's just because of the.
It might be one of the ones from the book.
It might be.
Maybe. Yeah. I know. I remember reading that some of the dialogue was from the book. I don't remember which lines, but there are certain things that they.
I do believe too. There's a newer series. I say newer, but it came out a little while back. It came out in 2020. It's the BBC version of Dracula. It was on Netflix.
Yes. I wanted to bring that up.
I feel like it follows a lot of the same beats as this show. Like it gives me that feel, and I think some of the lines from that show may have been lines that were in the movie, because I think he does say something. Maybe it's not the same exact line, but he does say something relatively similar to that. He even transforms into a wolf in the BBC version, and I really enjoyed it. And I think I enjoyed it because it reminded me a little bit of this film. So.
Yeah, I highly recommend watching that. They have a whole episode that's on the Demeter.
Yeah.
And when we were watching that episode, I was like, this would be a really cool movie. And I guess the makers of that movie thought the same thing, you know?
Yeah. And the guy who plays Dracula, Claes Bang, holy shit, dude. Yeah. Just, he almost has like this Bela Lugosi quality to him, but he just elevates it to a more sinister level. I love... I've been trying to seek him out in other stuff, but I think I've only seen him in one other project. So he seems like a solid actor. So within the film, I guess where we're at, they're pretty much chasing him back to his castle, and it's a big action sequence where they're chasing him down in that carriage. Everybody's just kind of, I can't even remember all the chaos that's going on, but it's just a intense chase scene. The music's just ramping up, and then when they finally get back to the actual castle, he gets stabbed, or no, he get throat cut. That's what it was. There was another guy that got stabbed in the back, one of the suitors, if you will.
Yeah, Quincy.
Right, and then the sun is rising, and this is one of those scenes where it kind of conflicts a little bit, where they were talking about the sunlight thing. Granted, they didn't say it would kill him, but it seems like there was a very strict timeline, like he had to get back before the sun came up, because the sun rises, he bursts out of the coffin before he gets his throat slit, and then kind of slinks into the church. And I found that to be interesting contrast to things that they had said prior. But again, maybe it had to do with his weakening body, and perhaps it was going to drain him from that point.
Yeah.
But even like the end scene between Mina and Dracula kind of does work within the context of the love story, where he it's almost like he's I won't really say forgiven.
Well, and it comes for full circle, because it starts out when, Vlad, in his vengeance, he curses himself.
Right.
When he comes home from the war and finds Mina dead, like, that scene with the priests in the chapel there, where he stabs the cross and the blood flows and he curses God, so that's where his story starts. And then at the end, it comes around full circle to him and Mina at the foot of this, cross that started the whole thing.
Right. We didn't even talk about that, like the opening sequence where he...
So nuts.
I had never heard the phrase, "I renounce God," before. And my family, I grew up in a very religious household. My mother audibly gasped when that line came up. Yeah. And I didn't have a context behind it, like nothing about it really hit me in the wrong way. But when she gasped, I was like, what happened? What did he say? Like, it just didn't register to me. And then as I've gotten older, I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. It just doesn't bother me,
Yeah.
But
well, even as like, I don't consider myself particularly religious, like that moment, like I still feel the emotion in it.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
Damn. Like,
especially
like,
at
serious,
the time. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in front of like the priests and everything. Like, it's like blasphemous. Like you could get like burned at the stake for something like that,
Sure.
Yeah, except that he is, the ruler in this kingdom.
Right,
so,
except he's the king. So but it's all metaphor. It's all symbolism, and I think it's very overt about that from the beginning. And I think some people were put off by that opening scene because
absolutely.
they didn't quite catch on to that. It's but I really respect it. It threw me off again the first time I saw it, but now it's like, yeah, that's the way to do that.
Yeah. I don't really know
like,
another
go
way.
for it.
Yeah. So
the blood pouring out of the cross.
Yeah,
and
it's
he
very
drinks
over
the
the
top.
blood. The blood is the life. And
Yeah, it's very literal about the metaphor.
well, and it might kind of get lost, but like that whole rage fest was because he's shown the body of his beloved,
Right.
and the priest is saying no, you cannot be reunited in heaven with
Oh,
her. She
that's
killed
right.
herself.
yeah.
Like
So it's fighting against the dogmatism of
yeah,
like
yes.
yeah. So that
Yes.
I really respect that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
so that's the message there is like this callous priest, could have come to him in his hour of grief
Right.
and gave him comfort, but instead he says, "No, you're not going to meet up in the afterlife. She's not going to heaven. She killed herself. Too bad. Sorry."
Yeah. So it was the organized church that was the problem, not necessarily.
Yeah, and so like what are your choices?
Yeah.
Either fall into despair, like, this person that you loved, more than anything, you're never going to see her again.
Yeah.
And she's basically in hell because she was in despair and killed herself.
Right.
Or you rage against the system that is telling you that. It's like, no, I renounce God.
Yeah.
It is kind of powerful when you look at it that way, and it's like that whole thing of like you create your own hell.
Yeah.
Like he did this to himself. You know.
And it's a bold choice, especially in 1992, because I feel like today religion doesn't feel as sacred as it did back then. But I'd say, like you mentioned, I heard at the time, a lot of people were very offended or upset by that. Yeah. And it seems quaint by today's standards. Like, yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah, I grew up Catholic, and so like that scene, like I completely understood what was being said there.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys got anything else that you want to touch on with this film? Is there anything we missed? Any actors? Anything?
I just have a random thing I wanted to say. It's a little
Sure.
bit of a rewind. One of my most favorite scenes in all of film history is when they have him cornered as the bat. He goes into the corner and turns into the rats. I just want to say that
That was so
yeah,
clever.
to this day,
Also the creepiest moment.
where he recedes into the shadows and you just see his glowing eyes.
To this day,
and then they
when
bring
I
the
think of this
light.
movie, that's the first thing I think about, and I absolutely love it. I will say this too: if you guys want to come to another show, we should all watch The Strain. I would love to rewatch it because I think you guys would find it interesting. They talk about a vampire called a strigoi, which is not your it's not your usual vampire. They're very different. It's a really good show though. I'm just gonna put it out there. I didn't think I'd like it as much as I would, but man, it was phenomenal. But no, I had to say that about that real quick. And no, just to this day, the glowing eyes, that's what gets me every time. And then the rats. I just watched this the other day to kind of give myself a refresher. Now I want to watch it again.
Yeah, we watched it.
Now I want to watch it again. And it.
I think I was just going to say the last time that I watched it was a random watch. I don't even remember why I just chose to watch it. I just saw it on streaming and I thought, I'm going to watch that. And just hit play, and I figured, I think it was late at night, and I thought I'll watch 30 minutes or so, and then I'll finish it up tomorrow. And I just kept watching. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have to stop watching because I'm really captivated at this point. I just got so engaged with it because I hadn't seen it in quite some time. Yeah.
It's just like Dracula.
But in all the best ways.
To me, it's like they just said, you know what? Let's take some inspiration from the Hammer films about Dracula and add a love story into it. Like that's the feeling that I get, and I love it. I think it works perfectly. And yes, like any film, it has its faults. We're not going to blame Keanu completely, but he's a good guy. But it's a solid watch. And a lot of people don't like to watch films that are 2+ hours because that's a lot of time out of the day. Everybody wants their content to be instant.
Yet they will binge a show for all evening.
Never makes sense.
5 or 6 hours.
And then complain about
exactly.
it. I one thing I did forget to mention, Nosferatu.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many Nosferatu references throughout this, but like the shadow stuff is directly from that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Well, and Dr. Van Helsing even says at one point when
he calls it out.
Nosferatu,
Yeah.
you know, like
And
love
I
that.
think that's
Love that.
I think
Anyway,
that's
sorry.
where they got a lot of the inspiration
Love letter to
for
vampires.
when we first see him in his, you know, I've always referred to it as his old
The
I
creepy
always
form.
refer to it as his old man form. But you know, he's
Yeah.
he's dangly, he's long, he's got the long nails and everything. To me that just screams Nosferatu with a wig on. Like that's what I think.
Yeah.
But it works.
Definitely.
It works for it. So
Did you guys notice he had the widow's peak, but it was like back here? Like his
Yeah.
hair receded so far, but he still had the widow's peak. I thought that was interesting.
well, in this movie, there's, you know, for fans of like, you know, metaphor and mythology and history, there's so many little details if you're looking for it. Like,
Yeah.
even in the scene where Jonathan Harker is saying bye to Mina before he goes over to Dracula's castle, they're in the garden and they're, you know, sitting embracing, and then peacock feathers come in to obscure them, and the peacock feathers are symbolic. They are peacocks are Hera's animal. They're her bird, and Hera symbolizes matrimony, marriage, loyalty, fidelity. So like just little stuff like that you can find if you're looking for. It's really cool.
She's changed this movie for me 100%. Like,
It's deep.
so
This
many
is-
things.
it's a-
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's well thought
and
out.
that's what makes it a great film, I think. A great film to me is one that you sit there and you watch it, and after you've watched it, it makes you want to go do research about it. You want to know everything you can about what's happening in it. And as you watch it again, you find more that you can look into. And this film is definitely chock full of tons of things that just make you want to research more. So
Oh yeah, and even with Jonathan Harker, like he represents like, you know, polite, proper Victorian society, and you know Dracula is the opposite of that. He's passion, he's animalistic desire, carnality, and it's kind of humorous to see Jonathan Harker so out of his depth in the castle. Even the scene where, like, I forget what he says, but he offends Dracula and Dracula pulls his sword out, and you know, instead of being like, you know, mortally frightened about that, he just says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have offended you." Like, very polite, very prim and proper. It's like, what kind of reaction is that in this castle, in this dank, like, decaying castle with this crazy, like, bestial madman of a, you know, count, and you're gonna apologize for offending him? Like, dude, walk out the door, run away, you know? And he's just like trying to navigate this like insane situation using, you know, the paradigm of polite society. It just like, it's like, it doesn't work. It's not gonna work, dude. And, you know, conversely, when Dracula comes to London, he is a fish out of water. He is trying to navigate polite society, and he keeps offending and scaring Mina, and he's like, oh, you know, doesn't know what to do because, like, he's about, you know, the, you know, base carnality and the passion, and he has to draw it back so he doesn't overwhelm her and freak her out. And he does, it's so funny, like, seeing those two juxtapositions of kind of fish out of water actors, you know. It's great.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it that way.
Fun little fact, the scene where Mina spots him in the streets and there's a cutaway and there's just this shocked look on her face. They struggled to get that shot, so Francis Ford Coppola decided to do something untoward
Oh man.
toward her.
Not like a Kubrick thing, right?
Nothing that bad, but you know, he
Like,
apparently some obscene.
what's his face in Die Hard? Actually.
Oh, actually following.
Yeah. But he did
Hans
something
Gruber.
obscene, and that look was from the obscene gesture. So
Oh,
got the
man.
shock out of her.
Wow.
That's clever.
Anything else? Anything else you guys want to talk about with this film? No.
I mean, there's so much. I feel like we went on for a while. But...
Yeah, we bounced all over the place.
Yeah, the different filming tricks, like when Lucy's the vampire and she's getting into her coffin, like they
Oh yeah, that's a
they
good
they
point.
reversed the shot. Like
Yeah.
they
I didn't
filmed it
notice that
with
till
her
this time.
getting out of it, and then for the scene they played in reverse, so she looked kind
It's very
of, you know,
unnatural.
jerky. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did that with a lot of things, and it added a creep factor to it, which was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again,
and that's
practical
what they
effects.
did with the you know, the brides, and also with Dracula when they're
Right.
crawling on the wall.
Yeah.
Like they would film them crawling forward, but then they would play it in reverse for, you know, the scene, so it made their actions look unnatural.
I will say, Gary Oldman in the top hat, that's such a good look.
Yeah.
You know,
And his glasses.
I kind of
yeah.
want to do that as a cosplay, but I don't know if I could pull it off.
Yeah, he just rocks it 100%.
Yep.
Well, a follow-up that we could also do with this, if anyone would like to talk about it, because I find it to be fascinating, but one of the last times I watched it, I think it was right after I'd rewatched this, my feelings had changed a little bit, and that was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I think was made to kind of...
In response?
Yeah, well, kind of to ride off that fame, because I think Columbia Pictures also released that one as well, so it would have been the same company that did this, and I think they were just like, well, this was so good, we got to do another one. We got to pump out another adaptation of a classic monster, and that Universal can't touch us on, so we got to do it different enough.
Yeah.
And then I remember liking it at one point, and I won't say I don't like it, but I realized a lot of things watching it now that I never picked up on then, and it changed my perspective a little bit. So that could be a fun follow-up.
Yeah.
That's another one that's like an onion. Like there's layers of meaning.
Would you say it's aged better?
In some, there are aspects of it that I think are fantastic, but then there are other certain choices that were made that seem odd. And I don't want to go too deep into it because that would be for the episode, but it just...
for sure.
It catches me off guard, you know?
Yeah. I'm a big Frankenstein fan.
Sure,
you know,
same.
Like I think as far as that goes, and that's a whole other conversation, I think the original is still kind of the peak with that one.
Yeah.
And the book is very good too, but also very different. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you guys got nothing else, I'll close up the show.
Yeah.
Les?
I was going to
about
ask.
it.
It's De Niro as Frankenstein in the '94 one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the Frankenstein's
Well,
monster.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The monster, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it
totally.
weird, just while I have you guys here, is it weird that one of my favorite iterations of Frankenstein's monster is from the Hugh Jackman Van Helsing movie? Is that weird?
No, I think that's spot on. I think that's maybe the best version of it in one of the worst movies. You know?
Have either of you watched Penny
That's
Dreadful?
one of my other favorite versions, and
That's
Yes.
my favorite Frankenstein.
They nailed it
Penny
with that
Dreadful
one
is-
for sure.
Yeah.
Because he is smart.
He breaks
the creature's smart
my
in the book.
heart. I love him so much. He's so
that is a
tragic.
slept-on show. I will say that it is so slept on, and it is phenomenal.
I'm glad you made me watch it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I told you you'd like
It
it.
was, yeah. Ava Green.
All right, everybody. Well, audience, ramblers, let us know what your thoughts on Bram Stoker's Dracula is on X or whatever social media platform we're on at Horror Ramblings. And if you've got a lot more to say and social media is just not going to cover it, send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com. If you want to discuss horror with other like-minded individuals, join our Facebook group or join us in our Ramblers room on Discord. You can find us on Instagram to see an assortment of horror images whenever we remember to post over there. I try, but sometimes I get busy. If you're feeling generous and want to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/pencilpaperproductions and help the show grow by leaving a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting app. Tell your friends to find us on their favorite podcasting platform as well. And if you happen to be using Spotify, take a look to see if we've posted up any questions or polls. Let us know what you think. Finally, if you prefer a central hub, keep up with any and all things at pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes down below. Eric, Meg, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody where they can find you on the internet.
Well, you can find me at Erik Slader. That's Eric with a K, Slater with the D. D is in Delta. On a few podcasts. Epic Fails of History is kind of my main show. If you want to hear more from Meg, she's actually on the Salem Witch Trials episode and a couple others. But we're actually doing a podcast pretty soon. I'm not quite sure when it's coming out yet, but it's called Nerdiogram.
Oh.
We actually put out the social media like way in advance if you want to follow it for when the show comes out. But it's, like the Enneagram, but Nerdiogram.
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking at the Enneagram typology and personality and personal growth system through the lens of pop culture, movies, different characters. We're going to be, typing, different characters.
Exactly.
And talking about,
like personality
how it
database kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, everybody check that stuff out.
And remember, guys, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.